An online shooter is only as good as the amount of people playing it. When there's a game with barely any single player content, you really have to rely on it having lots of other people online to play with, unless you really like playing with bots. I feel like this is Team Fortress 2's first strength, and it's a big one: longevity. This is the 10th year since TF2's released, yet it's still really easy to get into an online game with people. The matchmaking is less than perfect, oftentimes putting you into a comically unbalanced team, but if you stick with it, a dozen or so people will usually flood into the game and balance the teams out again. I feel like TF2 is so good because of its casual feel. It's not a game you have to take serious 100% of the time. You can get away with messing around a bit without being kicked from the game, unlike similar shooters where you're expected to constantly be going for the objective. Of course, you can take things seriously and really focus on the game at hand, but you can also sit there taunting with each other instead. One of my favourite things to do is jump into a game of Capture the Flag with fellow YouTuber Somnibrew, where the two of us mess around as spy. We mainly focus on taking out the engineers' buildings and sneaking into the intelligence room. But in this game we recorded, we did such a bad job that we didn't even make it into the intelligence room much. 2 Fort is the most played map in the game by far, so whenever I try to get into a Capture the Flag game, I get matched into that map, which is a shame because it's known as a pretty mad map within the fan base for a reason. The design of this map encourages certain classes to practically pitch a tent and not interact with each other. At any given time, there will always be multiple snipers on a balcony, sniping the enemy snipers that are doing the exact same thing, not helping the objective. Another example would be that most engineers end up turtling in the same couple of places, either at their spawn or the intelligence room. Whenever I play engineer, I use mini turrets and adopt a more involving playstyle while I run around with my guns. Which brings me to my next point pretty nicely. Each class can be played in multiple different ways with lots of different strategies. Each character has quite a bit of depth to them with a sizable learning curve. An example of this would be how when most people start playing, they assume a good strategy for the Pyro class is to run up to people and set them on fire with a flamethrower. Sounds simple, right? But in actuality there's more to it than that. First off, the flamethrower can also air blast, which you can use to blow medics away from the player they're healing, which can potentially interrupt an uber charge. The air blast also puts out fires too, meaning the Pyro is a decent support class if used correctly, since they can stop their teammates from burning to death. But even better, for each teammate you extinguish, the Pyro gains 20 health back, which is a really good way of incentivizing teamwork. The default Pyro loadout gives you a shotgun, which isn't an ideal weapon since shotguns are short range just like the flamethrower, but I think it's done intentionally. You can swap out each class's loadout and give them weapons with different advantages and disadvantages. The flare gun is usually one of the first items players tend to unlock due to it being tied to an easy achievement. Unlocking this weapon will make players try it out and swap out the shotgun for it, which is a really natural way of teaching players a lot about how the game and loadout system works. The flare gun, in a lot of regards, is a straight up upgrade to the shotgun. It's a long ranged weapon that sets any player you hit with it on fire. By changing one weapon, you've drastically changed how the Pyro plays and made them a lot more versatile. They used to be a class that could only do damage if they were really close to an enemy, meaning that you're incredibly weak against snipers and the like. But now you have options. If you're close to an enemy, you can use your flamethrower. If the enemy is far away, you can use the flare gun. And if the enemy is another Pyro who is resistant to being set on fire, you can use your melee weapon. But the flare gun isn't actually a straight up upgrade from the shotgun. It does make you able to hit opponents from far away, but as I mentioned, your fire doesn't do much against enemy Pyros, so in some instances, the generic shotgun is actually more useful. Everything I said was about changing a single weapon from the generic Pyro loadout. This game has 9 characters that have at least a dozen weapons each. The weapons and loadouts really do vary the gameplay a lot. One weapon you can unlock for the sniper is the Huntsman, a bow that can fire far more frequently and at a closer range than most other snipers allow, which encourages you to push forward and be a lot more active, unlike the rest of the sniper primaries. The Gunslinger is a wrench replacement for the Engineer that makes you put down mini turrets instead of normal turrets. A trap a lot of new players fall into is that when they play as the Engineer, they place their turret, dispenser and teleporter all next to each other out of harm's way and sit there doing nothing, waiting for someone to finally attempt to destroy them. But the Gunslinger changes that. The turrets are now weaker, cheaper and quicker to set up, meaning that you don't need to spend ages whacking it with a wrench and protecting it. Instead, using it to push forwards or serve as a temporary distraction or escape plan. This is why I add the Frontier Justice. a shotgun that has a smaller clip and doesn't do random crits, but boy, the upsides are great. If the turret gets destroyed while you're alive, you get given 2 crits per kill the turret did and 1 per assist. This weapon actually encourages you to not protect your turret and let it die after it's raked up some kills and assists. This pairs excellently with the mini turrets due to them being cheap and easy to set up. By changing just 2 items in the engineer's loadout, we've completely changed how they play. If I were only to give a single reason as to why Team Fortress 2 is such a good shooter, that would be it. The loadouts bring so much variety to this game. There's so many different weapon combinations that change the way a class is played. How do you get these weapons? A few different ways. I guess we'll get the controversial one out of the way first. You can buy weapons with real money. I am going to defend this, but mainly because it deserves being defended. This is a free-to-play game. You do not have to pay any money to play the game in the first place. But also, it lets you buy the weapon you want. Straight up, just pick a weapon and you can buy it for £1 or £2. This isn't a system where you have to buy loot boxes and risk not even getting the item you want. You can also get loot boxes if you really want, but it's better to just buy the weapon. There are ways of getting weapons as you play. If you're playing in the matchmaking, then a weapon will drop every once in a while. You'll just be randomly given a weapon for playing the game, and you get a new weapon every hour or 2 from this method, so it's very often. Even better than this, you can trade weapons with other players, meaning you don't have to rely on luck in order to get the weapon you want. You can just trade weapons you got for free for playing the game. There are also achievement items, with the earlier mentioned Huntsman and Flare Gun being 2 of them. Earn achievements in game to get a weapon, and these weapons can also be earned in the earlier mentioned ways too, so you don't have to do all the achievements to get them. This is as perfect as it honestly gets when it comes to microtransaction implementation in a game in my opinion. And yes, I have bought some items with real money, but most of them I got just for playing the game. It's not just the loadouts that add variety. I mentioned earlier that yes, if you're playing Capture the Flag, you'll usually be on 2 Fort, but this game has over 100 maps over the decade it's been out for. There is a lot of variety and a lot to learn in terms of map layout. With this many maps, you're bound to like a few of them, especially considering how bright and distinctive they are compared to each other. I admit that I completely suck at this game. It's very rare that I'll top the leaderboard in a game, despite putting 193 hours into it. But that's okay, I still have a lot of fun with it. It's definitely flawed, with the biggest of those flaws being the lack of recent updates and a small development team. But
the game is fun.
And that's all that matters in the long run. It's already managed to last a full decade now, and it certainly feels like it's got several years worth of content in it with the different loadouts, maps, and game modes. So, if you don't mind me, I'm gonna go and play some more Team Fortress 2.